tonight we're not drifting off in a palace or a battlefield. There are no swords, no banners, no marching armies, just a room, a quiet one, with stone floors that echo too much, and shutters that creak even when the wind doesn't blow. A desk sits in the corner, cluttered with ink pots and papers that smell like dust and defiance. The man who lives here once changed the way we see the universe. Now he barely sees visitors. His name is Galileo Galilei. And this is what it felt like to live out your final years under house arrest. Not in a prison cell with iron bars, but in a villa where the silence rings louder than any verdict. They said he was dangerous. They said his words could tilt the world. So they told him to stop speaking. And when he didn't stop fast enough, they locked the doors. He was old, sick, brilliant, and terribly alone. But still, in the cracks of silence, he kept whispering to the stars. Not to be remembered, just to remember who he was. This is not the story of his discoveries. This is the story of what came after. The waiting, the fading, the stillness that never ended. You're famous, but the doors are closing at first. Nothing feels different. The walls look the same. The corridors still fill with morning light, the kind that streaks across the floor and pauses on the same loose tiles you've stepped over 1,000 times. Servants still carry bread and wine to your table. The pigeons still land on the terrace at noon. And yet something quiet has shifted. A weight, not on your body, but in the air. It follows you from room to room. It waits beside your bed. They haven't called it punishment. Not yet, but your books have been removed from the shelves. Your telescope has vanished from its perch by the window. The neighbors don't wave anymore. Your name is everywhere, in letters, in sermons. On the lips of people who've never seen your face, but it's not always said kindly now. Once it meant genius. Now it means defiance, or danger, or both. You hear it spoken behind walls, softly, as if it might echo, as if it might burn. A courier arrives at dawn with a sealed letter. You break the wax with hands that no longer tremble. The words inside are not cruel. They are polite. Too polite. They say you may remain in your home, that you are not to leave, that your dialogues will no longer be published. They say the matter is concluded, but you know what conclusion feels like. This feels like a beginning. You walk the length of the villa, slowly, counting the doors you can still open. You stand beneath the olive tree you planted 20 years ago, and wonder how long it will outlive you. The sun touches your face. You close your eyes and remember how it looked through the lens. Not perfect, not eternal, just floating, like everything else. Later, a friend visits. Not a student, just a friend. He says nothing about the trial. He talks about the weather, about Florence, about the latest gossip from Rome. You listen, you smile, but when he leaves, he does not embrace you. He bows, then steps through the gate, glancing once over his shoulder. You watch until you return to your study. You pick up a pen. Not because you have anything to say, but because your hand doesn't know what else to hold. You look at the page. Then out the window the stars will rise again tonight. They always do. But tonight, for the first time, they feel farther away. You thought truth would set you free. It didn't. The ink has dried on the page where you said you were wrong. Not in your mind, not in your heart, just on paper. You wrote the words slowly, carefully, each one heavier than the last. The officials watched you sign it. They nodded. One of them smiled, as if they'd done you a kindness, as if mercy could be measured in the shape of a signature. You told them the earth did not move. You told them the heavens were fixed. You told them what they wanted to hear. And the moment you did, something small and sacred inside you went silent. You thought there would be relief, that the weight might lift, that the world outside would welcome you back, changed but intact. Instead, the gates closed behind you. Not prison gates, just your own garden walls. But they felt the same. The sentence didn't come with shackles, just restrictions. A man of your age should be resting, they said. A man of your temperament should reflect. You nodded. You always nod now. It saves energy. The rooms are not locked, but the space around you tightens every day. Friends send fewer letters. Even the servants have learned to move without sound. You wonder if you're shrinking, or if the house is growing around you, folding you into itself like parchment, pressed shut and forgotten in a drawer. One night you stand in the doorway of your study and stare at your old telescope, not the one they took. A smaller one you built yourself in quieter years. It leans against the wall, unused. The lenses are fogged with age. You reach for it, then stop. You remember what looking up used to mean. Now it feels like reaching towards something that no longer wants you. You sit in the chair beside it and trace the curve of the frame. You whisper to it, not out loud, just under your breath. You tell it you're sorry for what they did, for what you didn't fight harder to keep, for the truth you folded like a letter and handed to men who never looked through glass at all. Later, you eat a meal you don't remember tasting. You walk through the villa without knowing where you're going. You sleep without dreaming in the morning. You wake up and the world looks the same, but something in you knows it isn't, not anymore. You thought the truth would set you free, but the truth only burned more brightly when you tried to hide it. And now, even in a room full of windows, you find yourself living in the dark, not because of what you believed, but because of what you said to make it stop. A villa becomes a cell when you can't leave it. The morning light still pours in through the eastern windows. It stretches across the stone floor, just like it always has, pooling near your slippers and warming the hem of your robe. Birds still flit past the shutters. The cypress trees still lean gently in the breeze. From a distance, it could be a painting, peaceful, timeless. But inside your chest, the hours thicken. They do not pass. They wait. They loop. They press down. You used to walk, not far, just into town, to the riverbank, to the market, sometimes to the chapel, even though your faith never needed a roof. You remember the sound of your sandals brushing gravel, the way people used to nod when you passed, not in fear, not in awe, just in simple recognition. Now the gate is shut. Not locked, but shut. Symbolic, they said. A formality. You touch the iron latch every morning and never lift it. You tried once a week ago, or a month. You're not sure anymore. You stepped outside, just past the doorway. The sun was warm. You closed your eyes and felt almost human. Then a voice, a reminder. The man didn't mean harm. He was doing his duty. You turned, smiled, stepped back inside. He thanked you. You haven't tried again. The villa is not cruel. It holds you gently, like a place remembering love. The garden still blooms. The wine still arrives. The food is seasoned just right. They listen to your footsteps. They memorize your silence. They echo your thoughts back to you in quieter tones. You find yourself talking more to objects than people. The vase on your desk, the cracked globe in the library, the mirror in the hallway that doesn't always reflect you right away. Your body aches in new places, not from illness, from stillness, from repetition. You notice how often your fingers twitch when they have no pen to hold, how your feet slide forward even when there's nowhere to go. The mind doesn't adjust as quickly as the body. It keeps reaching for a world that's no longer within reach. You start naming the rooms, not to be clever, just to make them feel less strange. The narrow hallway becomes the East Road. The pantry is the market. The garden, of course, becomes the heavens. You walk through them like a traveler in your own house, pretending that each threshold is a border you've crossed. But when night comes and the lamps flicker against the walls, you know what this place really is. It is beautiful, and it is a prison. Not because of bars, but because you remember what the wind felt like on your face when it wasn't filtered through a wooden frame. Because you still wake thinking tomorrow might be different, and because the door still opens, but never wide enough. They say it's not prison. You know better. There is stew again tonight. Warm, spiced gently, a little rosemary. You swallow each bite without complaint. The bread is fresh. The wine is generous. No one is starving here. No one is suffering in ways that leave bruises. That's the illusion. That comfort means freedom, but the silence that follows each meal is louder than hunger ever was. You sit at the table long after the plate is empty, listening not for music, not for voices, just for anything that isn't your own breathing. The villa does not creak or groan. It holds its quiet like a well-kept secret. The kind you're not supposed to ask about. The servants speak softly. Softer each week. You're not sure if they're afraid for you or of you. You try smiling more. Thanking them for trivial things, they nod. They vanish. They always vanish. Today, someone brought news from the city, a pamphlet. Not addressed to you, of course. Just left near the hearth carelessly. Flipped through it. There was talk of comets and tides. Nothing with your name on it, but between the lines you could feel it. Your absence, like a shape cut out of a page. Everyone still reads the stars. They just pretend they read them first. You step outside after supper. The garden smells like lemon leaves and old water. The fountain trickles, the frogs sing. You sit on the edge of the stone wall and look at the sky. You can almost forget the sentence if you look up long enough. Almost. But then you hear the gate creak shut behind you, and you are reminded again. This is not solitude. This is a stage where no one comes to watch you anymore. You remember a joke once told at your expense. Something about how even the planets had to ask the church for permission to move. It made you laugh then. You still laugh now, but it's quieter. And you don't know if you laugh, because it's funny or because it still hurts. Before bed you try to read. The candlelight dances over the pages. The words blur, not from sleep, from memory. You've read this book so many times you begin to see the phrases before you turn the page. You close it and listen to the stillness again. It is not empty. It is full of everything. They say this is not prison, that you are merely being protected, that your health requires peace, that your words cause too much stir, that this is for your own good. You nod again, always nodding. But when the house is asleep and you stand alone at your window, you do not feel peace. You feel unseen, unspoken, unmoving, and for a man who once measured motion in the stars, nothing feels more like punishment than stillness, dressed as mercy. Your books are banned, but you still write in the margins. You've stopped writing letters the way you used to. Too many never arrive. Too many come back with edges trimmed or entire paragraphs replaced with silence. So you write smaller now, just smaller. In the folds of books, in the corners of pages you've already read between the lines of psalms on receipts. In the margins, the paper listens, even if no one else does. Today you found a worn copy of Aristotle tucked behind a basket of dried figs. You don't remember putting it there. The cover curled like it had been hiding from the light. You opened it and found your own handwriting, faint but still breathing. Equations scratched like confessions. A question in the corner. What if they're wrong? You smiled. You don't remember writing it, but it still feels like yours. The ink you use now is thinner, watered down so it dries fast and vanishes faster. The words fade quickly. That's the point. You've become fluent in disappearing things. The guards don't search your shelves. They assume old men only read for comfort. They don't know comfort can live in a formula, in a sentence never meant to be published, in a truth you refuse to bury, even if you have to whisper it into paper that no one sees. Your hands are slower. Your eyesight slips sometimes, but your thoughts haven't softened. If anything, they've sharpened, trimmed down to essentials. You no longer write to convince. You write to remember that you once saw something clearly, that the world moved even when no one wanted it to, that you noticed. A storm passed through the valley last night, the kind that rattles shutters and carries branches like warnings. You stayed up listening to it, not because of fear, because it made sound, honest sound. It didn't pretend. It didn't lower its voice. You held a candle and opened a notebook. Just scraps sewn together. You wrote one word over and over again still. Not a question, not a sentence. Just the shape of the feeling. In the morning, you hid the pages beneath the floorboards, behind a loose tile only you touch. You tell yourself it's not deceit. It's memory storage. You're not hiding, you're preserving. One day someone with steadier hands and fewer eyes watching, they banned your books. They say your words are dangerous, that they twist the faithful, that they bend the stars toward chaos. You let them say it, out loud, you nod. Quietly your ink disagrees. You look at the bookshelf now, and it no longer holds books. It holds fragments, seeds, truths in disguise. You read them slowly, letting your eyes drift to the margins where your thoughts still live. The text in the middle is fine. It's the scribbles on the side that make you feel real. You are no longer published, but you are still speaking. Not loudly, but clearly. The margins are listening. The telescope is gone, but the sky still visits you, used to carry it like an extra limb. The telescope heavy in the mornings, heavier at night. Its brass bones cold against your palms. You remember how it clicked when you adjusted the lens, how it breathed when it found something new. It's gone now, taken, removed like a dangerous tool. They said it would tempt you, that you should rest, but they didn't understand. You never looked at the heavens for power. You looked because they answered without words. Now, your hands reach for it in the dark, forgetting it's no longer there. You feel the absence of weight the way some men feel the loss of a limb. Your fingers close around air, and you open the window instead. The stars are waiting. They have always waited. They do not care about tribunals. They do not ask you to recant. They do not punish you for seeing. You sit in the garden with your collar up, a wool blanket over your knees. The wind smells like salt and pine. You tilt your chin toward the sky and squint until the patterns return. Jupiter still winks where it always has. Saturn is stubborn but faithful. You cannot see them as clearly, but you still know where they are. You remember the distances, the rhythms. You recite them under your breath like prayers. Not because you think they hear you, but because you still do tonight. You imagine your telescope is buried beneath the garden, that it will sprout one spring like a strange silver flower, tall and trembling, bending toward the moon. The thought makes you smile, not the polite smile you wear for guests, the kind that pulls gently at your chest, the real kind. A servant brings tea and places it beside you. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. He sees you watching the sky with no instrument and doesn't interrupt. Maybe he thinks you're slipping. Maybe you are. You sip the tea and let the warmth carry you into stillness. When you were young, you thought knowing would bring peace. That naming the stars would tame them. That truth would silence fear. But now, older, quieter, you understand something else. The sky does not need to be solved. It only needs to be seen. And even without your tools, you are still seeing. No scribbled pages, no calculations. Just your eyes and the cold and the long, invisible distance between everything that ever was and everything still becoming. The sky bends above you like a page not yet written on, and for once, that is enough. A letter arrives, but it's not meant for you. The post arrives late today. You hear the creak of the gate and the shuffle of boots on gravel, a brief knock, a rustle of cloth, then silence again. The servant leaves it on the table. You don't rush to it. You never do. Most letters now are for others in the house, announcements, inventories, gossip too carefully worded to be useful, but this one is different. You feel it before you touch it. The paper is thicker. The seal is red. You do not break it. It isn't addressed to you, but someone left it open. You tell yourself you're not reading it. You're just glancing, skimming. The name inside is unfamiliar. A young man somewhere north. A scholar or trying to be. He speaks of stars, of motion, of questions that sound like echoes of your own. He writes with the energy of someone who hasn't been told no yet. His diagrams are clumsy but hungry, and there at the edge of one paragraph he cites a name, yours, not hidden, not careful. He calls you the one who saw clearly. Not heretic, not recanted, just clearly. You read it twice. Then again you feel something press against your ribs, small and warm and almost afraid. Hope, maybe, or its quieter cousin, continuance. Someone is still looking up. Someone is still asking. You place the letter beneath a stack of old maps. You won't return it. You won't burn it, you'll just keep it close. A reminder that even if you are not allowed to speak, your voice still walks elsewhere in the world, in younger hands, in unshaken pens. Later, you walk the halls of the villa slowly, fingertips grazing the stone. You pause at your study door and stare at the books you've stopped organizing. You open one, not the front, the back. A blank page you begin writing. Not a treatise, not an argument. Just a sentence, a single sentence. You don't care if it's found. You only care that it exists. You once believed the danger was in what they took from you. The telescope, the lectures, the freedom. But now you know it's not what they take. It's what you keep and what you leave behind, quietly, carefully. Like letters that don't belong to you but still carry your name. You return to the garden at dusk. The wind has picked up. The sky is cloudy. No stars tonight. But that's all right, you've already seen them. You close your eyes and think of the boy writing in the dark, charting a sky he cannot yet name, and whispering to the silence the same questions that once kept you awake. The world will forget many things, but not the questions. Not if someone else keeps asking. Visitors come quietly. Not all are friends again. It starts with footsteps you don't recognize. Not heavy, not hurried, just careful. As if whoever they belong to is trying to erase them as they walk. The gate doesn't groan. The bell doesn't ring. But someone opens the door anyway. The servant appears at your study with the look he gets when something delicate needs handling. He says, "There are visitors." He doesn't say names. You nod. You always nod now. They arrive without dust on their cloaks. Their shoes too clean for real travel. One smiles too quickly. One doesn't smile at all. They sit without asking and look around the room like it belongs to them. You offer wine, they refuse. You offer silence, they fill it. They ask how you are, whether your health has improved, whether your days are quiet. These are not questions, they are measures. You answer simply. You do not volunteer more. They already know the answers. They came to see what hasn't changed. John leans forward and places a book on the table. Not one of yours, but familiar, a student's copy. Margins filled with ideas that sound like yours, reshaped, but not erased. He says they're watching a few young men in Padua. They speak your name too freely. They reference too much. You are not being blamed, they say, but influence carries weight, and weight can tilt the wrong direction. You look at the book and say nothing. Your hands stay folded. You do not reach for it. You know how this works. This isn't curiosity. This is containment. They want to know if you still burn. They ask if you have visitors often. You say no. They nod as if that's good, as if isolation is a virtue. They comment on your garden, the quiet, the peace. They leave the sentence hanging in the air. It would be a shame to lose it. When they rise to leave, one of them places a folded note on the edge of your desk. No seal, no name, just paper. You wait until they're gone before touching it inside. A list, 4 names. Students, correspondents. Some you've written, one you've never met. It's not a warning, it's a boundary. You're not to cross it again. You burn the note, not from fear, from understanding. You've lived long enough to recognize veiled threats spoken in polite Latin that night. You do not sleep. You lie awake counting how many footsteps it takes to cross from your bed to the front door. You stare at the ceiling and wonder how much quieter your house can become before it forgets how to hold a voice. Visitors come quietly now. They do not shout. They do not argue. But not all bring peace. Some bring reminders. Some bring silence disguised as conversation. Some come to see if the cage is still locked and if the bird still remembers how to sing. You try not to watch the walls crack. It begins with a sound so faint you think it's your joints again, the familiar pop of age. But then it comes again, a slow stretching sigh in the wall beside your desk. You pause mid-sentence. You place your pen down. You listen. It doesn't happen again, not right away. But you already know it will. You tell yourself it's the weather, that the stone is just adjusting to the cold. That's centuries. Old villas creak in winter like knees and spines. But by evening, a hairline crack has opened along the seam of the ceiling, snaking just above your shelf of unread letters. You run your fingers across it. It's dry. It's nothing, but it's there. You try not to look at it the next day. You light a candle and aim the glow away from that corner. You sit farther from the wall. You open a book and hold it too close to your face. But still, when your eyes wander, they find it. The line has deepened, just slightly. A little more honest about where it's headed. You wonder if this is how forgetting begins, not with collapse, but with slow shifts. A little. You wonder if your memory is the same, if there are lines forming inside it you can't see yet. You forget a name this morning, a word yesterday, nothing serious. But still, the servants don't mention it. They sweep, they dust, they look past it. Maybe they think you haven't noticed, or maybe they think you'd rather not talk about it. They're not wrong. That night, rain comes. It taps on the windows like a child asking to come in. You listen to it from your chair, wrapped in wool and watching shadows curl along the walls. There's a new mark now, a darker streak where water has found a home. It's not dramatic, but it's steady. You close your eyes and imagine the house as a body. Yours, perhaps, once strong, still dignified, but aching stiff in the mornings. Whispering complaints you pretend not to hear. You think of all the things in this house that hold your weight, the chair, the bed, the staircase. You think about how gently they're all trying to keep you upright. In the morning, you ask the servant to fetch you chalk. Just white chalk. No explanation, he nods. You mark the cracks yourself, not to repair, just to see how far they travel tomorrow. You try not to watch the walls crack, but they are cracking slowly, softly, like everything else around you. Not enough to alarm, just enough to remind. The villa is old. You are older. Nothing holds forever, but for now, it holds just enough. You read the Bible more now, not for them. For you, you never imagined the Bible would become your refuge. Once, it was a book of rules, judgments, and sermons whispered behind closed doors. A shield worn in public, but folded away in private. Now it sits open on your table more than any other book. Not because the church demands it, not because the inquisitors expect it, but because you need it, because in these pages you find a voice that does not condemn. The text no longer feels like a trial. It feels like a conversation. The Psalms sing softly in your mind, like an old friend returning after a long absence. Verses about deserts and water, about darkness giving way to light, about hope. You read them slowly, savoring the language as if it were a meal, sometimes bitter, sometimes sweet, but always nourishing in ways you did not expect. You trace the words with your finger, reading them aloud when the house is empty. The sound steadies you. It reminds you that even when no one else listens, some things are still constant. Some promises are still true. You find comfort in the stories of exile and return, in the prophets who spoke when silence was easier. You imagine yourself among them, not condemned, but chosen to endure. There are nights when you linger on passages about faith and doubt, wrestling quietly with the same questions the saints once faced. You whisper the prayers meant for strength and forgiveness, not for absolution, not for penance, but for peace. A peace you feel slipping between your fingers most days. The Bible's margins are now filled with your notes. Small jottings, thoughts, sometimes just a single word: courage, mercy, light. They are reminders to yourself, messages in a bottle sent across a sea of loneliness. You do not expect them to be read by others. You write because the act itself keeps your mind sharp, your heart steady. Sometimes a servant finds the book open and doesn't close it. You see their eyes glance at the words. You think they wonder what you find there that the world outside no longer offers. You don't explain, you don't have to. The pages say enough. The Bible is no longer a weapon used against you. It is the room where you wait, the quiet in the storm, the anchor in a world that has tried to sweep you away. It is not salvation, at least not the kind promised by crowns or courts, but it is something real, something yours. You close the book gently when the candle burns low. The words stay with you long after the light fades. In the dark, you repeat them silently. They become a heartbeat, a rhythm, a reminder that even in silence, you are not alone. They still call you dangerous without saying why it's there every time you hear footsteps in the hallway, not spoken, not shouted, but felt. The unspoken warning that follows you like a shadow too long to ignore. Dangerous. They say it without saying it. A word used like a blade, sharp and silent. You don't need to ask who says it or why. You know. It's not your voice they fear. You speak less now. Fewer words carry through these halls. It's your ideas. The way your eyes look past the surface. The way your thoughts refuse to stay buried. They call it dangerous because you see what others refuse to see, because you question what others accept, because you hold on to truths that threaten their order. Visitors arrive less often now. When they do, their smiles are thin, their hands closer to swords than pens. They talk in circles, avoiding the edges where your meaning lies. They pretend you're an old man clinging to memories, harmless and fading, but they watch how the servants glance at your door. They listen when your name slips into conversations like a cold wind. Your writings are smuggled out piece by piece, some destroyed before they reach eyes outside this villa, others copied in secret by hands too cautious to meet yours. You wonder how many believe you, how many fear you, how many wish you would simply disappear. You hear whispers in the market, traders crossing themselves when they pass your name, pilgrims crossing the city walls, kissing the stones, but recoiling at the mention of you. They don't say why. They never do. It's enough that you are a warning, a story told in hushes and sideways glances. You think about what it means to be dangerous when you no longer hold a sword, when your battles are fought in shadows and ink, when your enemies cannot see the shape of your resistance. They fear a man who cannot be pinned down, who speaks truths dressed as questions, who refuses to bow. The guards watch your windows more closely. They linger longer in your hallways, but you keep your gaze steady. You move quietly like the cracks in the walls, slowly, unstoppable. You have come to understand that danger is less about destruction and more about persistence, about being the stone that doesn't break under pressure, the flame that refuses to be snuffed, the voice that whispers beneath the roar, reminding the world that some truths cannot be silenced. Tonight, as the moon rises pale and distant, you light a candle and place it by the window, not to send a signal, not to challenge, just to hold a small, steady light against the dark, because even dangerous things need to shine. Even when no one is watching, you speak softly now, even to the wind once. Your words echoed like thunder, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. Now they slip from your lips like a secret carried on a breeze. Soft, measured, barely there. You speak less, not because you have nothing left to say, but because the world has taught you the cost of noise. You talk quietly to the wind outside your window, not hoping it will carry your voice far, not even hoping it will carry it at all. You speak to feel the sound of your own breath, to remind yourself that you are still here, still breathing, still alive. The few who come bring news that sounds like distant thunder, fading and out of reach. You nod and listen. You ask little. Your questions are careful, your answers lighter than they used to be. Sometimes they seem surprised that you are still composed, still calm, still dignified. You wonder if they expect you to break like the walls around you. At night, when the house is still and the candle flickers low, you whisper prayers, not loud, not rehearsed, just words, simple words. They tumble from your tongue in a steady rhythm, not for penance, not for salvation, just for company. You've learned that silence is not emptiness, it is space. Space for thought, space for memories, space for hope, even when it seems impossible. In this quiet, you hear yourself more clearly than you have in years. You hear the questions you still carry, the fears you still hide. Your lips move when you walk through the garden. You speak to the trees, to the stones, to the moonlight. They do not answer, but they listen. They hold your secrets. They don't judge the softness of your voice or the tremble in your hands. Sometimes a servant pauses nearby, watching you with curious eyes. They do not interrupt. They understand that this is your time, your moment to speak without expectation, to be heard without demand. You remember when your voice could fill rooms and courts, when your words could start fires or calm storms. But you also remember the price. The exhaustion of shouting, the loneliness that followed every echo. Now you choose softness, not because you have lost strength, but because you have found a different kind. A strength that does not need to roar. A strength that lives in whisper and shadow. Tonight, the wind carries your quiet words across the villa grounds. They vanish into the dark, but you do not mind. Some messages are meant only for the night, some truths only for the heart. You close your eyes and breathe. You speak softly now, even to the wind, because in the quiet you have found a voice that cannot be taken. Your daughters send letters. You reread them until the ink fades. The letters come slowly at first. A few lines hurriedly scrawled, edges worn from travel. Then more carefully folded pages, ink sometimes smudged by rain or hurried hands. They arrive without fanfare, tucked beneath your door, or handed over by a trusted servant with a cautious smile. You don't ask for them, you don't beg. They come because they must. Because your daughters remember who you are, even when the world tries to forget. You sit by the window, the pale light catching the curls of the paper as you unfold each one. The script is familiar and strange all at once. Young handwriting learning to hold itself steady, echoing the grace you once saw in their eyes. They write of small things, the colours of the flowers in the courtyard, the market's chatter, a friend's laughter, a stolen moment of sunlight, and of larger things too, their fears, their hopes, the way the city shifts beneath their feet. You read the letters again and again, tracing the lines with trembling fingers until the ink begins to fade beneath your touch. You memorize each phrase, each carefully chosen word. The paper grows thin and fragile, but you cannot stop. You fold them carefully and place them beneath the weight of old books. Then you pull them out to read once more, as if the act alone could bring them closer, could hold their voices steady inside these silent walls. Sometimes you whisper the letters aloud, your voice carrying softly through the empty rooms. It's a ritual, a way to bridge the distance, to hear their laughter, their questions, their love. Even when the letters say nothing of the world outside, you hear everything in between the lines. You wonder if they know how much these scraps of paper mean to you, how they fill the hollows carved by absence and silence, how they remind you that despite the walls, the watchful eyes, the endless waiting, you are still a father, still part of their lives in the quiet moments. You imagine their faces, the curve of a smile, the flicker of determination in their eyes. You imagine their hands writing those letters, unaware that the words will be held like treasures in a house that knows too much sorrow. You fold the latest letter, place it gently with the others, and look out the window at the fading light. The city breathes, alive and distant, and somewhere beyond the walls, your daughters live and grow, sending pieces of themselves in ink and paper. You clutch their letters close, knowing that even as the ink fades, their love endures, etched forever into the fabric of your heart. You hear footsteps in dreams, but no one is coming at night. The villa feels different. The silence stretches thinner, like a thread pulled tight over empty space. You lie awake, eyes half closed, listening, and sometimes you hear them, footsteps, soft at first, like a whisper over stone floors, slow, deliberate, echoing down halls long abandoned by voices. You tell yourself it's just a dream, that the mind plays tricks when the day's weight presses too hard. But the footsteps come again, closer this time. They approach your door, pause, and then fade. No knock, no entry, just the lingering sound of someone who almost came but didn't. You reach out in the dark, fingers grasping for something that isn't there, for a presence, a voice, a light. You search the shadows, but find only your own breath and the steady pulse of your heart. The footsteps become a cruel rhythm, a promise that hope exists just beyond reach. In these dreams, you are not alone. Someone moves through the rooms, watches from the corners. You hear faint words, half-remembered conversations, a laugh, a sigh. But when you call out, the sound is swallowed by the darkness. The visitor slips away, leaving only silence behind. You wonder what it means. Is hope a stranger who knocks but never enters? A visitor who hesitates at the threshold and turns away? Or is it something quieter? A memory, a longing, a question without answer. The days pass with heavy stillness. The letters from your daughters arrive and you reread them. But the footsteps in your dreams haunt the spaces between the words. They remind you that waiting is not only measured by time, but by absence, by the empty spaces where life might have been different. You try not to fear these nightly visits. You tell yourself they are a sign that you are still alive, still waiting, that even in your isolation, the world reaches out, even if just to retreat. But the ache in your chest grows, a hollow weight that no candle can chase away. Sometimes just before waking, you reach for the door. You want to open it, to invite the footsteps inside, to hold the hope that lingers there. But your hand falls back to your chest. The door stays closed. The visitor remains a shadow. When dawn breaks, you rise with the sun, but carry the night's footsteps with you, unseen but heavy. They are a reminder that even when no one comes, hope still knocks. It waits patiently, quietly, just beyond the door. And you, locked within, listen. They celebrate discoveries you made without saying your name. You hear the news carried by whispers and carefully worded letters. New inventions, new ideas, new ways of seeing the heavens and measuring the stars. They speak of discoveries that shake foundations and redraw maps. They speak of progress, but rarely do they speak of you, your work, your observations, your courage to look beyond what was allowed. All become shadows in the stories told by others. The names on the scrolls are different. The praise belongs elsewhere. You are a ghost in a celebration not meant for you. You imagine the halls where they gather, scholars and nobles, eager for the latest marvel. They raise glasses to the future, to knowledge, to those brave enough to change the world. But they speak of names that sound polished and safe, names that fit neatly into the tapestry they've woven. Your name is missing, silent. It stings more than you expect, not because you crave glory, not because you want a monument or a crown, but because you see the truth of how easily history forgets those who challenge its authority, how it erases the ones who stand too close to light and shadow, the ones who pay the price so others can walk forward. You think of the nights spent alone, peering through your telescope, tracing paths no one else dared follow. You think of the papers burned, the books hidden, the arguments silenced. You remember the moments when you nearly gave up, when the weight of the world seemed too much to bear. Yet here they are, building on what you uncovered, standing on shoulders you once climbed. Though they do not acknowledge the height you reached, they claim the summit, while you remain in the shadows below. A necessary omission, they say, a sacrifice for the greater good. You try not to let it break you. You remind yourself that truth does not need praise, that the stars continue their silent journey regardless of who watches, that the universe does not choose favorites, but the ache remains a quiet, persistent echo. Sometimes a visitor mentions a discovery in passing, a subtle nod to what you once revealed. You catch it in their eyes, a flicker of respect, maybe guilt. But the words never follow. They speak around you, not to you, as if your presence would unravel the careful narrative they have constructed. You carry this invisibility like a cloak, heavy and cold, but also protective. You become the unseen hand guiding the future, the silent pulse beneath the noise of applause. You push forward, knowing that one day the truth will shine brighter than any name. Until then, you watch as they celebrate, as they build monuments to ideas you sparked. You listen to their voices filling halls you cannot enter, and you wait, quiet, steady, unyielding, knowing that the legacy of discovery belongs not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who dared to see beyond the horizon. Your eyes begin to fail. The sky grows darker, the nights grow longer, and the darkness presses in thicker than before. You find yourself squinting at the pages, the ink bleeding beneath your weary gaze. The telescope, once a window to the heavens, becomes a blurred lens that offers only uncertain shapes. The stars you so carefully mapped now flicker like distant memories, their sharp points softened by the veil creeping over your sight. It is a cruel irony. The very instrument that once unveiled the universe's secrets now betrays you. Your eyes, which held the wonder of 1,000 discoveries, grow tired and dim. Each blink feels heavier. each moment of clarity fleeting. You wrestle with frustration and sorrow that no remedy can touch. You reach for the candles earlier, the flames trembling in sympathy with your failing vision. Shadows stretch across the walls, distorting familiar shapes into haunting spectres. The villa's once comforting corners seem strange and distant. The comforting constellations you counted on to guide you through nights of solitude now hide behind a curtain only you can see. Friends and visitors speak more softly. Their words seem muffled, echoing from a distance you cannot close. You catch only fragments, missing the edges and the nuance. You wonder if your silence grows not just from restraint, but from the fear that you no longer fully grasp the world around you. Yet the sky does not surrender its mysteries. It holds fast, indifferent to the fading light behind your eyes. You remember the countless hours spent watching the heavens, searching for patterns that connect the cosmos. Now you must trust that the knowledge you gathered remains even if your sight falters. At times you feel lost in a twilight between clarity and shadow, between what you once saw and what now slips beyond reach. You dream of stars bright and clear, but awake to dimness and the steady pull of night. The universe feels both vast and painfully close, a paradox that presses on your heart. You find solace in the quiet, in the spaces where darkness and light intertwine. You learn to listen more than look, to trust the rhythms beyond vision. The stars may be distant, but their story persists in the echoes of your mind and the pages you have filled. Your hands linger over your notes longer, tracing the curves of diagrams you can no longer read with certainty. The weight of each mark is heavier now, each line a testament to a vision that once burned bright. You wonder if the world outside senses the dimming of your sight, or if it continues unaware, spinning on without pause. Still, you hold on to the fragments of light you can see, the glimmers that refuse to fade entirely. Even as your eyes betray you, your mind reaches outward, beyond the darkening sky, searching for the stars that once guided you and the truths that still call from the shadows. You speak to God through closed windows behind thick walls and shuttered windows. Your voice becomes a whisper carried only to the heavens. You speak softly, not for anyone listening below, but for the one you cannot. Words fall from your lips like fragile offerings, released into the still air of a room that holds your solitude as tightly as your thoughts. You ask questions without expecting answers. You ask if silence can hold meaning, if the absence of sound might be its own kind of truth. You wonder if the quiet between the prayers is where God dwells, the space where words end and understanding begins. You pray not for relief, but for the courage to accept the unknown. Your hands fold gently, fingers tracing invisible patterns on your chest, a silent language shaped by years of seeking. You call upon the God who watches stars and listens to dreams, who holds the universe in a steady gaze even when yours falters. You confess fears too deep for daylight, hopes too fragile to speak aloud. Sometimes the air shifts, a breeze slips through a crack in the window, carrying the scent of distant earth and rain. You take it as a sign, a breath from beyond the walls, a reminder that even in confinement life moves and listens, that silence is not absence but presence, an invitation to stillness, to reflection, to faith. Your voice grows steadier in the dark, finding strength in the spaces between words. You do not ask for glory or answers, only for peace in the waiting. You wonder if God hears the prayers of those forgotten by the world, those who speak soft. Outside, the world continues, loud, chaotic, unyielding. But inside, your quiet conversation unfolds, a sacred dialogue stitched with humility and hope. You speak to God through closed windows, offering your silence as truth, your stillness as surrender, and your heart as a witness to the unseen. In that quiet, you find a kind of freedom, not from your walls, but from the weight they carry, a freedom that flows from the whispered promise that even in silence you are heard, even in waiting you are seen, even in darkness there is light. You forgive the church. You don't forget it. Years of silence, of shadows cast by heavy robes and colder judgments, have settled deep inside you. The institution that once promised guidance became a prison in itself, wielding power like a sword sharper than any you faced in your work. You carry scars not just on your body or mind, but etched in trust broken and hopes denied. Yet, forgiveness is a strange and patient thing. It does not erase the past, nor does it demand forgetting. Instead, it lives quietly in the spaces between memory and mercy. You forgive the church, not for its failures, but because holding on to anger would be another chain to wear during your confinement. You remember the faces of those who sought truth with kindness, even when it meant standing against the tide. You honor their courage, their gentle resistance, the moments when faith was more than rules and fear. These memories soften the bitterness that once threatened to consume you. At the same time, you do not forget the moments of silence when answers were withheld, the veiled threats that made questioning dangerous, the heavy hand that stifled discovery in favor of control. These remain a part of your story, a caution and a witness. Your forgiveness is a balance, a refusal to be broken by betrayal, and a refusal to let betrayal be forgotten. You carry it like a lamp in the dark, illuminating not just wounds but the path forward. It reminds you that faith and fallibility often walk hand in hand. In your solitude, you speak of this quiet reconciliation, not as an absolution for all, but as a personal peace born from struggle. You accept that the church is made of imperfect people, capable of great harm and great grace alike. You release your pain to make room for understanding, even if full healing feels distant. You wonder if those who once condemned you will one day see the cost of their silence. If the church will remember not only its power, but its responsibility. You pray that future seekers will find a kinder audience, a place where questions are welcomed rather than feared. Forgiveness has not erased the past, but it has freed you to look beyond it, to hold your head a little higher, to speak a little softer, to face each day with a heart less burdened by bitterness. You forgive the church. You don't forget it. And in that truth, you find a fragile peace that no walls can contain. You die in the same house they sentenced you to. The villa that held you captive for years becomes the place where your story quietly ends. The walls that once echoed with whispered accusations and heavy footsteps now watch over your final moments. The same windows that shut out the world frame the fading light of your last days. You never left, not truly. Your body remained confined, but your mind traveled farther than any chain could reach. Yet in the end, the house keeps its. You breathe your last beneath ceilings that bore witness to your isolation, your hope, and your fading strength. There is no grand farewell, no crowd to honor your passing, only the silent attendants who close your eyes and fold your hands, carrying out rituals spoken in muted tones. The weight of your absence settles over the rooms like dust, unseen but deeply felt. You die in a place meant for punishment, but your spirit is untouched by those walls. It carries the quiet defiance of a man who sought truth in the face of silence, who whispered to stars no longer visible. Your legacy is not measured by the room where you took your last breath, but by the light you ignited beyond its borders. As the days pass, the house remains. Its stones hold stories of confinement and courage alike, and though history may remember the sentence, it cannot imprison the truth you lived. You died in the same house they sentenced you to. but you lived beyond any walls. The final days in that quiet villa speak of a man confined but unbroken. Galileo's story is one of paradox. His body restrained within 4 stone walls, yet his mind soaring among the stars he so diligently charted. His life under house arrest was a slow unravelling, a solitude forced by fear and suspicion, but also a time of profound reflection and unyielding hope. Despite the darkness closing in, both literal and metaphorical, he never ceased to reach beyond, to ask questions that echoed through silence and shadow. His eyes dimmed, his steps slowed, and the world outside turned onward, often forgetting the man who had dared to challenge the skies. Yet Galileo's legacy was not held hostage by the cold walls that caged him. His discoveries, though uncredited in his lifetime, became the foundation stones of modern science, quietly carried forward by those who came after. They spoke loudly where he had been silenced, proving that truth persists even when voices are hushed. In those long years, Galileo spoke not only to the heavens, but to the divine in whispered prayers behind closed windows, finding solace in faith and in the steady presence of his own questioning spirit. He forgave the institution that condemned him, not to erase the pain, but to free himself from its hold. His death in the very house of his sentence was a quiet closure to a turbulent life marked by brilliance and suffering. This is a story of endurance and the bittersweet nature of genius constrained by fear. It reminds us that even when the world tries to silence a voice, the pursuit of truth cannot be contained forever. Galileo's life under house arrest is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that sometimes the brightest stars shine most fiercely in the darkest skies. So as you close your eyes tonight, remember the man who gazed upward while chained below. His journey was one of quiet rebellion, of faith in what lies beyond, and of a legacy that no walls could ever hold back. Sleep now, not just in rest, but in the hope that truth, like the stars, is eternal.